Back in the late 2000s, I was in my early 20s and living what felt like a perfect, messy, temporary life as a broke expat in Berlin. I had been there for a few years already. Long enough to feel at home. Short enough that everything still felt exciting and slightly unreal. I lived cheaply, worked odd jobs, and spent most of my money on rent, food, and nights out with friends. One night, one of my roommates, who was from the UK, and I went out to see a band play. It was late-ish by the time we left the venue. Maybe midnight. Maybe closer to 1 in the morning. After the show, we started walking home, heading toward the entrance of a subway station. We were in a relatively central part of the city, but at that hour it was quiet. Too quiet. The streets felt long and empty, stretching out ahead of us. We were in high spirits. We'd had a couple of drinks. Not drunk. Just pleasantly tipsy. The kind of tipsy where everything feels funny and light. We laughed loudly and talked over each other, arm in arm, not particularly worried about anything. The subway entrance was ahead of us, at the far end of a long street. It was late October or early November. Still warm enough that walking outside felt nice. The air was damp and misty, and the streetlights cast soft yellow halos that floated in the fog. As we walked, a small gust of wind pushed a swirl of dry leaves across the pavement in front of us. That's when we both noticed a figure ahead of us in the mist. At first, it was just a shape. Slow moving. Hunched over. As we got closer, it appeared to be an older woman. She was stooped forward and carrying bags in both hands. She walked with a very pronounced limp, dragging one leg behind her as she moved. We were still chatting in English and were just about to pass her on the sidewalk when she suddenly cried out. "Oh, help. Won't somebody help me?" She said it in English, but with a thick German accent. Her voice wasn't frightened. It wasn't panicked. It was demanding. Like she fully expected someone to stop for her. My roommate tried to keep us moving. She subtly sped up, clearly wanting to pass and keep going. But I slowed down. Because this was an elderly woman. Alone. Late at night. Struggling to walk and carrying bags. My instinct kicked in before my logic could catch up. I asked her what she needed help with. She immediately replied, "It's my leg. Help me carry the bags. I live just over there." She nodded toward an apartment building entrance about half a block up the street. Without thinking, I said, "Oh, of course we'll help you." It came out automatically. My roommate looked annoyed and uneasy, but followed me anyway. We each picked up one of the woman's bags and started walking toward the building. As we passed under a streetlight, I finally saw the woman's face clearly. And I almost gasped. She looked exactly like a witch from a German fairy tale. Her back was bent unnaturally. There was a large wart on her nose. Her hair was thin, gray-white, and straggly beneath her hood. She wore dark, heavy wool clothing that seemed old-fashioned. For a split second, I was genuinely startled by her appearance. But I pushed the thought away. That's ridiculous, I told myself. She's just an old woman. Looks don't mean anything. We reached the building's doorway. The entryway door was slightly open. Which was strange. In that neighborhood, doors were always locked. She pushed the door open easily and suddenly seemed much stronger than before. She leaned forward and held it open for me, positioning herself so I would go in first. She gestured toward a narrow staircase leading upward. The light inside was dim and yellowish, flickering slightly. "Just up the stairs," she breathed. "Just up the stairs." I froze in the doorway. My tipsy, 23-year-old brain tried to make sense of everything at once. The polite thing would be to carry the bag upstairs, right? That's what a good person does. But every hair on the back of my neck was standing straight up. The hallway felt wrong. The narrow staircase felt wrong. At the top of the stairs, I could see a doorway on the right. Slightly ajar. Dark inside. A heavy smell drifted down toward us. Stale. Musty. Like old smoke that had soaked into the walls over decades. The woman's voice changed. It became urgent. Insistent. She wanted me fully inside. Immediately. If I had to describe it, it sounded like a cartoon villain trying not to sound excited while setting a trap. As I stood there, I felt torn between dread and politeness. I didn't want to be rude. I didn't want to seem paranoid. I even let out a small giggle. The situation felt so over the top. So perfectly like a horror movie. That it couldn't possibly be real. Right. Then my roommate snapped. She literally yelled, "Oh hell no." She grabbed my arm. Hard. Hooked it into hers and dragged me backward out of the doorway. We dropped the bags. And ran. The old woman shouted after us. Her voice sharp with disappointment. Not fear. Not confusion. Disappointment. My roommate didn't slow down. She pulled me across the street and down the subway stairs as fast as she could. Into bright lights. Noise. People. Safety. Only then did I realize how fast my heart was beating. Once we were on the platform, I asked her what the hell that was about. She told me two things. First, she was certain the woman hadn't been limping when we first saw her. That the limp only appeared once we were close. Second, she said, when you were standing in the doorway, I suddenly knew she had a creepy adult son waiting at the top of the stairs who was going to chain you to her bed. Maybe it was imagination. Maybe it was paranoia. But even now, years later, I'm grateful for my roommate's instincts. Because whatever was waiting at the top of those stairs, I've never wanted to find out.